Now, as you heard in the bulletin, the Icelandic carrier WOW Air has collapsed. It's cancelled all of its flights, including flights between Dublin and Reykjavik, leaving passengers on some of the most popular routes to Iceland stranded, particularly that Iceland-US connection. Our business editor, Will Goodbody, has been speaking to some stranded passengers at Dublin Airport.
We were flying out to Reykjavik for a 5-day break. The first we heard was when we arrived at the airport this morning and just literally went to the information desk to ask where we check in. So we had no notification whatsoever. Fairly frustrated. We came up from Cork last night specifically because we had an early flight and we were really looking forward to the holiday. So, just trying to see what our options are now with the holiday company. I even spoke to the holiday company, the tour operator, yesterday because I couldn't check in online, and they assured me that that was all standard procedure, just to come to the airport, check in at the airport wasn't a problem. Here we are, disappointed, but worse things happen at sea, so we'll just deal with it.
Well, it was a horrible experience. I was waiting for my flight to take my flight this morning, from here to Washington, but I received a message 3 a.m. in the morning saying that my flight was cancelled and nothing else. And then I received another text message saying that I was entitled to get compensation and for accommodation, but nothing else. I've been trying to contact them, and then I arrived here and they didn't give me any options. There's no one else that I can contact here or by phone. I also sent them a tweet and nothing. It was out of the blue. They knew that it was happening because I checked the news just this morning and I realized that this is not the first flight, so they knew, but they didn't say anything until today.
Well, we flew in with WOW Airlines on the 20th to Ireland, and everything was great. The flight was wonderful. We got here this morning. I received an email from them stating that the flight was canceled. So I called WOW, and they said, we're going to rebook you. They actually rebooked me a ticket to fly out on the 30th on an airline that no longer exists. So I don't understand. I don't mind staying in Ireland for 2 days. I love Ireland. But why would they book me a fictitious flight and then I'm going to come here and cry because I'm still stuck here and I need to get home?
Some of the passengers affected by that collapse of WOW Airlines, and Eoghan Corry, editor of Travel Extra, is here in studio, shaking your head listening to some of those passengers on.
They were still taking bookings until 7 a.m. this morning. They were actually still reserving spaces, as your contributor said, on an airline that doesn't exist. The reason this happened was they were seriously running out of money since November. They were in negotiations with Icelandic. It looked like it had made great progress. Then it all fell apart. Then with a company called Indigo, who's grown whiz to being one of the top 10 airlines in Europe. They're a big airline, a very credible airline investor. But those talks were supposed to be completed on Monday. Early on Monday, it was clear they weren't going to be completed. The next thing that happened was Irish lessors moved in on their aircraft in Montreal and in a second aircraft, which was in Cuba, is now in Miami. They were grounded. So we ended up with a situation where of their fleet of 11, even by Monday night, 2 of them were grounded by lessors. Another was being grounded by the Icelandic airport authority, who hadn't been paid fees, clearly running out of money. And they still believed, somebody in there still believed they would get another deal going with Icelandair. But by this morning, they were also talking about converting debt into bond options that are pretty much a pretty straightforward accountancy procedure for companies very, very deep in cash flow problems. It's quite clear that Skúli Mogensen, the CEO, in a letter to employees a couple of hours ago said, I wish I'd moved sooner. He still believed right to the end he would get money from somewhere, but sadly they've run out of runway.
And where does this leave? What are passengers' rights? Because Iceland, obviously, not in the EU.
It's not really to do with EU 261, because you're not going to get compensated for delays from an airline that doesn't have any money to pay you. It is to do, it really is the level of coverage that your ticket carries with it. All the advice from the Icelandic authorities and the Commission of Aviation Regulation in Dublin has also issued much the same advice. Most people buy by credit card now, so there is a cashback option on credit cards. That's probably the first stop. If it's gone through an intermediary, I would warn that always causes huge problems. If you're going through one of the big online wholesalers that sells you the airline and you pay them. The second option is that if you've gone through a travel agent as part of a package, one of your contributors there, they will pay out the compensation. This raises an anomaly, by the way, that the travel agent and tour operator pays out the compensation. It doesn't come from the Irish bonding system because airlines aren't covered by it. Some listeners will remember Malav going down spectacularly 2011. The travel agents eventually got their money that they paid out in compensation in January of this year, 8 years later. But it does mean from the consumer point of view, they are entitled to compensation. Travel insurance, very unusual to have airline failure in travel insurance. You almost have to specify it when you're buying the travel insurance. Some people have it. It's become a little bit more common since the failures of recent years in the Icelandic ash cloud. But if you've paid through an intermediary, a lot of people will be stuck having paid a low fare. They were quite low, the fares they offer to North America, trying to make the same journey with a competitor, and it's going to cost you a lot more.
The other big issue worrying a lot of travellers this summer is what's the story with the Boeing Air Max planes and this fix and all the rest?
Boeing have come up with the fix. The big question now is, will the regulators pass it? There's been a lot of questions asked about Boeing. Effectively, as most listeners will know at this stage, what had happened was a new software system was installed which caused the aircraft to start nosediving, and then when the pilot tried to correct it, overrode the pilot. They say they've put a fix in for that. They've going to have it from 2 information sources, and they're giving the pilot the option to override it completely much quicker. That's all very well. Boeing have been quite upbeat in their presentation of this, but it has to go through the regulators, and the regulators of America have been accused of being too cozy with Boeing in their previous relationship. It did look like Boeing put a new aircraft onto the sky with the requirement that it wouldn't require major pilot retraining with simulators, and that seems to have been their goal rather than making sure that the aircraft was safe. And in that circumstance, I don't see the regulators rushing to pass the new fix that Boeing have put in the market. It could be a little bit more time while the Boeing 737 Maxes are on the ground.
All right, thank you very much indeed. As ever, Eoghan Corry, editor of Travel Extra there.